Welcome to the Faith and Feelings podcast. My name is Taylor Joy, and I'm passionate about helping you untangle and honor your emotions, authentically practice your faith, and integrate both into your everyday life so that you can experience the goodness and delight that comes from living in relationship with yourself, God, and others. Thank you for joining me. Let's get started. How we walk into a room will always carry evidence of our formation. The way we act, if we get big or small, whether our voices soften or louden, if our shoulders hunch or straighten, whether we anticipate acceptance or brace for unbelonging, it all tells a story about something we've lived. In those moments when it feels like you don't fit in and that shame-filled question wells up inside, why can't I just be normal like everyone else? There's always a deeper question. What is your definition of normal? Where did it come from? And when did you learn that you did not meet that standard? This conversation with my friend Amina is one of Faith and Feelings' most downloaded episodes. Through her story, she shows us that when we read rejection into a room, its roots can often be traced to pivotal moments of self-rejection in our childhoods that are still living inside of us today. Together, Amina and I process what it really looks like to belong, when to trust the invitation of others, and how to walk into a room as your own friend. So let's go now to my conversation with Amina. Well, welcome to Faith and Feelings, Amina. I'm so glad you're here.
It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me, Taylor.
So as you know, we met our first year of grad school, and there was honestly so much going on inside of both of us during that time. There still is. Yeah. And I remember so many moments during that year where we would be processing our thoughts, emotions, and reactions from the day. And we held that space for each other, inviting each other into deeper self-awareness and growth. So many fun memories, right?
Yeah, I feel like those were so many. There were so many key moments for us to be able to reflect. They were much needed.
Much needed, yeah. Well, we are in a series right now called Why on Earth Did I Do or Say That? And in this series, I'm inviting different guests to share stories about a time when their emotional response to a situation was a 7 or 8 on a scale when it was warranted a 2 or 3. We all have so many moments like this, but we rarely pause and reflect on what's underneath these responses or connect the dots between these everyday reactions and deeper themes in our stories. So to get started, Amina, would you mind sharing a story about a time when you were emotionally dysregulated?
Yes, I'd love to. I feel like there are so many moments that I can draw from. But one moment in particular that stands out to me is a time that I got invited to a Catan game night. It was supposed to be a double date, and we were getting to know these new friends of ours. And at this point, I think I had played Catan once or twice. And I knew that I was probably the least competitive person in the group, but I wanted to be able to show up and feel like I was able to play the game well. And I think just going into kind of a game night like that, like I'm an only child, so games are not typically something that I've engaged in a ton in a group setting throughout the course of my life. So sometimes I just feel nervous when I play games with other people. But we got to their house and we started to play Catan, and things were going pretty well. And I think I was like hanging on to every rule or every move that someone was making. And I think I really wanted to be able to feel like I was playing the game well and that I wasn't maybe standing out as somebody who didn't know how to play the game. And I just remember there was like a point in the middle of the game where I had interpreted somebody's move in the game as like something to replicate. And so I was like, oh, this is my time to do this move. And so then I did it like boldly. And I think that was kind of like my effort to feel like I was also really well versed in the game and that I was clever, that I was like strategic, because Catan kind of requires those types of skills to be able to play well. And I remember everyone was like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. That's not. And I remember like feeling like kind of just like that choky feeling in your throat where like your breath is kind of caught in your chest. And I
Mm-hmm.
just remember like withdrawing my cards from the table. And I I think at that point I wanted to be like, no, but I saw somebody else do it. Like I was trying to defend myself, but everyone had already moved on. Like it was like they were continuing to play the game, and I was like sitting there kind of stuck with this moment that I had just put down these cards, and like I really wished that I didn't even do that in the first place. And I remember like just kind of freezing. Like it was like a moment where I like couldn't move on from that moment, and I just felt like everyone else was probably replaying that failed attempt to play the game in their minds, and I felt like it kind of just felt like everything was moving on, but I was still stuck in this like
Yeah.
emotionally like tense place. I remember just thinking to myself that I was trying to think of some excuse to walk away from the table or be able to remove myself from the situation because I felt so uncomfortable. Um, and it took a while for me to be able to like move on and continue to even want to play. Like I think I was kind of just like, I don't want to play
Yeah.
anymore. But for something like a mistake in a game that probably would have warranted like a two or a three where you just recognize, oh, like that's not the rule. Okay, like I learned something from this. Instead, I think for me, I had just felt this like deep sense of like embarrassment and shame. Um, and I felt like the pressure I probably put on myself coming into the game like mounted. Um, and I couldn't like live it down. Um, so yeah, I just think back to that moment, and that was like an incredibly difficult moment for me to like get out of. And in the
Yeah.
moment, it's like you just don't even really know what's happening, or it feels like something's happening to you that you didn't even choose. And there are so many ways that you would prefer to show up in that moment that you all of a sudden feel like you don't have the capability of
Yes.
doing. Like you're just like, I'm stuck. Like I'm stuck like this. I don't have another option. Like this is just the way that this moment is, and I actually don't know how to get out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Amina. I can resonate with so much of what you said. um, Two of the emotions that you mentioned when you were sharing your story were embarrassment and shame.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think of any other emotions you were feeling?
Yeah, I think I felt disconnected. Um, and I think I felt disappointed.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Who are you disappointed at?
myself. I think I felt disappointed that didn't, I wasn't able to show up like everyone else.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that led to the sense of being disconnected. It's like I'm not able to show up and participate in this the way that I feel like other people are. So now I feel disconnected, and then I think that shame is a result of like not feeling like you belong there. Um, and there's a story and a narrative that starts to like play out in a moment like that, where like what really like propelled all of those things was just putting those cards down. Um,
Yeah.
and like that feeling of disappointment is like, oh, like if I just didn't do that, I wouldn't feel like this.
Hmm. How long do you think you'd been feeling that way? Like for an hour, a day, a year, 10 years?
Oh, yeah, I think that there are so many ways that that experience has played out in my life. And I think since I was a little girl, um, just, I think that desire and that yearning to belong, and the desire and that yearning to feel like you are normal, like everyone else, to be a part of something, and to live up to some maybe external standard that is set by the way that you perceive other people. Sometimes I think you see other people and you're like, I need to be like that in order to belong, or I need to show up like this to belong. And when you like create that standard for how to show up, it almost is pointing to an area of yourself where you feel like you're not enough.
Yeah.
And so I think that like throughout my life, I have tried to show up in ways to fill in the gaps for where I feel like I'm not enough. And when I feel like I fail at that, there's this like weight that like falls on me. And so I think that little moment of that like Catan game night is kind of just like one instance of like many throughout the course of my life where I yearn and long to show up somewhere and feel like I'm just like everyone else, that I belong there, and that I can show up, and resonate with the people around me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you think about that feeling of not enoughness, of shame, of embarrassment, what did you feel about that feeling in the moment?
Oh my gosh, it feels so icky.
Yeah.
Like you're
That's a
just
perfect word.
yeah, it just feels so icky. You're just
Yeah.
like, oh, like I just, why? Like why you start to kind of like feel frustration for that again, like for that feeling. It's like I feel shame and I feel embarrassed, and now I feel like gross because I feel shame and I feel embarrassment, and it's like you're digging. It feels like a deeper hole is being dug. Yeah, and it's this like ickiness that you feel like you can't get out of. And I remember in that moment thinking, like, I just wanted to run away. Like, there's this like, I want to hide,
Yeah.
because this just feels so, like, I felt naked. And I think I started to just feel like, why do I feel naked and shame and icky when all I did was make a simple miscalculation about a game strategy? Like, you almost forget that you're even playing a game because you're so consumed by these emotions and feelings about the emotions you're feeling.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned just wanting to run away. Mm-hmm. Where did you want to go?
I just wanted to like be in a room without anyone. Yes. I remember thinking like, this is a great time for me to go to the bathroom. Yeah. Maybe I just need to go get water, like just looking for practical excuses to step away from the table. But I really wanted to go home. Like I just felt like I've ruined everything. I need to leave.
When you think back about that moment of realizing that you had misunderstood a role in the game, what were you feeling in your body?
So I remember there was just like that like choky feeling in my throat. And I felt like tightness in my chest, like this like feeling of like mounting kind of just like pressure in my chest. And then I think like, that like feeling you get right before you want to cry, but like you don't want to cry. So you're like fighting it really hard. So it's like in your head and in your throat and in your chest. And like wanting to fully lean into the emotion I was experiencing, but not wanting anybody to see it. So it was kind of just like stuck, like right, like in my like chest and like my throat and my like head.
I'm curious about what you're feeling in your body right now as you're retelling this story.
Yeah, I think I feel like a little cold, you start to like shiver a little because you're nervous, or like there's like kind of not a knot in my like stomach, but there's definitely like the like I could maybe need to take a deep breath to be able to just let out whatever like knot is forming. So it's kind of just like not fully maybe what I felt during that game night, but maybe like 9 steps down from it.
Going back to that moment at the game night, what were some of the thoughts rolling around in your mind?
Yeah, I think a lot of the thoughts were definitely not kind thoughts. They were probably something along the lines of, why couldn't you just be normal like everyone else? I knew this was going to happen. Stop trying so hard. Or just even the feelings of like, why am I this way? Like, why do I do this? Like, why do I feel like shutting down? Like, am I weak? Am I like emotionally like unstable? Like, just like asking myself all these questions about like why I am showing up the way that I am.
Yeah.
I don't think that I was really trying to like care for myself or tend to the feelings I was experiencing. I felt like I was kind of joining the chorus of shame that was being sung at me.
Yeah.
I felt like that was the only thing I knew how to do in the moment.
One of the thoughts that you said that really stood out to me was, I knew this was going to happen. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. I think, like I shared at the beginning of the story, just my relationship with games or competition or participating in group activities, and already feeling inadequate in that area, and looking at my like kind of story of origin, whether that is like me being an only child, as a disadvantage in those situations. And because I saw it as a disadvantage, I already knew at that point in time that I was going to need to try to fill in a gap that I thought I had. And I think there was already fear like coming into the game night, and pressure, and like a feeling of lack that was already there before I even got to the game night. And so my fear was that I was going to like not belong. And I think making that move and it being wrong and everyone telling me like, you can't do that, was just like confirming.
Yeah.
And not that that's true, right? It's not sufficient evidence for the idea that I don't belong, or that I'm inadequate, or that I lack something. It's not sufficient evidence. But in the moment, it felt like, here's the evidence for what I thought was going to be true, or what I was afraid was going to be true. Like, I knew this was going to happen. Like, all of my worst fears are being confirmed in this moment.
Yeah. I'm just picturing you in that moment feeling frozen and stuck. What did you most want in that moment? What was the longing that you were hoping for?
That's a good question. The longing that I was hoping for, I think I wanted to feel like, that's actually a really good question. I think I wanted to feel, I don't know, I think I don't want to make it another person's responsibility to make me feel like I belong when they've done so many things already to make me, to be, and I was invited, So it's like, I can't then say, well, I wanted them to tell me it was okay, or
Yeah.
but I think in that moment, like the longing that I experienced outside of any expectation from other people was to feel like I had permission to make a mistake
Mm.
without it infringing on my sense of worth or belonging. It was like reassurance, um, reassurance, or even just like invitation, like continuing to feel invited, even when I didn't maybe live up to the rules of the game. Um,
Mm.
I feel like maybe that's what I would have wanted in that moment. I feel like I'm verbally processing now. I actually don't know.
I love it.
But yeah, probably like reassurance. It's okay. It's not a big deal. That kind of a thing.
You wanted to be accepted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think accepted by myself. Like
Mm.
no one was rejecting me. I was rejecting me,
That's good.
like everyone still wanted to play the game with me. Everybody just,
Yeah.
like no one kicked me out. Like, but in that moment, I felt like I didn't live up to my own expectation for how I should be showing up. And I don't think I was accepting myself. I wasn't giving myself permission to be okay with making a mistake. And I think I needed to accept myself and to be able to tell myself that, like, it's okay to make a
Mm.
mistake. And if even when I do make a mistake, my worth and my sense of belonging doesn't need to be shattered. But I think in the moment I was just like, that's it. It's done. Like, I've sabotaged any future sense of belonging.
So self-rejection.
Yeah.
Do you remember the earliest time that you felt that way?
The earliest time I felt this way. Yeah. I think like when I was a little girl, I really wanted to be good at something that other people thought was cool. Even if I didn't like it, at least other people would think that I was good at it. And I remember like there was a group of girls that would go to the park near my house all the time, and I thought that they were really cool and I wanted to like be a part of their group. And they were playing some sort of game. Of course, it was a game. Um, and I remember like just, kind of just like wanting to come along and be a part. And I'd always felt kind of like an outsider when I was a kid. Again, like kind of looking into like groups of people that were like siblings or had friend groups. And I kind of felt like I was like on my own. And I remember just like kind of just coming along and wanting to play with them. And that, like, I remember one of them was just like, we don't want to play with you. Like, go away.
Oh,
We don't want to play with you. And they all like ran away from me and like were like sitting like in the park, like pointing at me and talking to me. And my mom was just like, it's okay, come, like we can just play together. And I remember like my mom was pushing me on the swing, and I just saw them just like pointing at me and talking about me. And I just was like kind of like trying to hold in my tears while I was swinging on the swing with
yeah.
my mom. Um, and so that was like maybe like an overt like experience of rejection. But I feel like that was like maybe like a core like early memory of feeling
Mm-hmm.
like I couldn't participate. I wasn't good enough to participate, and I didn't belong, and I was rejected, and I felt like there was something wrong with me. And like, there had to be for somebody to not want me to be a part of their friend group or their game or their activity. And I think I was probably like 6 or 7 at the time.
When you think about 6-year-old Amina on the swing,
yeah,
what do you wish you could go back and tell her?
I think if I could go back to that moment and say something to her, it would probably be that she is an extremely special little girl that is playful and creative and funny, and that there are a lot of people who do want to play with her, and that who she is not dependent on those who miss out on getting to enjoy and experience her. Kind of just taking the pressure of rejection off of her to bridge the gap, and to hold on to that like sense of like worth. And those girls, you don't need to play with those girls anyway. They're mean. They're not nice.
No. Yeah. And then if you move forward a few years and you think about Amina right now, in that moment of self-rejection at the game night, what might God have wanted you to know in that situation?
I think that God would have wanted me to know that making mistakes is a part of learning. It's a part of the learning process. It's good. It's helpful. It's safe to make mistakes, especially in the presence of those who have invited you in. And then I think God also would have wanted me to know to trust the invitation. That if you're at the table, you belong there. And a simple mistake is not going to like remove you from the table. So yeah, trust the invitation.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. I have loved this conversation. I feel like it's just one of our normal conversations over coffee or FaceTime. Yeah. But as a final question, what have you been learning recently about staying emotionally grounded in hard places?
Yeah. I have been learning to affirm what's true about my surroundings. And doing that while self-soothing. So whether it's like needing to hug myself, needing to hold my own hand, maybe it's like caressing your knee when you're feeling uncomfortable. But in those moments, affirming what's true, which is in that moment, one way that I could do that would be to tell myself, I was invited.
Yeah.
I'm still invited. No one has told me to leave. I'm learning to play this game. It's only my 3rd time. I need some more time to learn. Trying to affirm what's true about those moments to myself so that I can bring myself back to the moment when my emotions sometimes want to take me back to my fears. And I imagine that moment during the game was like little Amina, like inside of me, remembering what it's like to feel rejected and anticipating that in that moment. And sometimes in those moments, we have the opportunity, and we might not be able to do it every time, and that's okay. But sometimes an opportunity presents itself to be able to soothe the little girl in a way that maybe you couldn't when you were younger. And so the same things I would probably tell her, I probably need to tell myself. So trying to remind myself of what is true in that moment, to be able to stay grounded and to stay present and to look up and out at that moment of what's around me and to fixate my attention on something like good or beautiful, or a reminder of this present moment that isn't a replication of a past like scary moment that I've had. So being able to differentiate between like the past and like this moment, like I'm here now, and maybe I need to hug myself a little bit, and maybe I need to remind myself of what's true. Take a deep breath, and just keep practicing that, and knowing that it'll take time, having patience with myself on the journey.
Yeah, that's so good. Thank you so much for this conversation, Amina. I'm really grateful for you and for our time together today.
Thank you so much, Taylor. I'm really glad that we were able to just share the way that we always do.
Wasn't that such a beautiful conversation? Amina's vulnerability is a gift that invites us to consider the ways in which the loud voice of self-rejection is alive in us. I want to close with a quote by Henry Nouwen that I've been reflecting on. Self-rejection is the greatest enemy of the spiritual life because it contradicts the sacred voice that calls us the beloved. What I love about Amina's story is how the dysregulation that she experienced at that game night was painful to be sure, but it was her body's way of signaling a deep-seated something that was unhealed inside of her. By slowing down and unpacking what was underneath, she was invited into deeper healing and trust in the love and acceptance of God and others. I'm so grateful that you listened to today's episode. Thank you for spending time with me. I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on Instagram at TaylorJoy or through my website, taylorjoymurray.co. Also, if you enjoyed this conversation, it would mean so much to me if you took a minute to subscribe and review the podcast. This is an easy way to partner with me and is invaluable in reaching new listeners. Until next week.